Mom Donnie, he won. Now there's some people a little weary because he came out with this video, in case people don't know, and he was going over some of his things about how maybe he needs a little bit more money or whatever is happening. And he said if landlords, are becoming more difficult or the housing isn't right, the government's going to seize that building.
Yeah.
And it makes people a little worried about how that could affect the New York housing situation, right? Is that kind of the thought process on it?
Yeah. So it's yes, and we don't get too political. Outside of absolutely, you should pay attention to politics because of rules, regulations, licensing, permitting, all that stuff. We're in the real estate business. Excuse me, as investors.
Yeah.
And those are things you better be paying attention to. So we talk about them a little bit, and this is a good case study. I don't know if I would call it good. I don't know if good's the right term. A case study on how this is going to shake out for housing, because this was New York was, along with San Francisco a couple of years ago, came out and said no more short-term rentals. We're going to take them off Airbnb. We're going to raise all the it's hurting our housing costs and cost of housing and renters. It's making it to where our residents can't get any more affordable housing. Blah blah blah. That's their reasoning for it. They pulled it off, and guess what happened to housing prices?
What?
They went up.
Yeah.
Renters' prices went up. So it doesn't, a lot of times these very highly regulated types of policies, they don't necessarily sound good.
Right.
A lot of times they don't work out that way. A lot of, I'm a capitalist at heart.
Right.
I believe that the free markets are going to take care of themselves. I think you're going to have more competitive pricing. You're going to have better living situations. He's talking about a number of different things. What he's talking about is eminent domain. And eminent domain is something where the government can come in and pay you what they deem fair market value for a property if they need it for something. It's typically to build freeways and roads and things like that. And so they will come in and say, hey, listen, we need this new off ramp, or we need a freeway here, we need a new belt route or something. And they will actually go in and say, hey, listen, we're gonna impose eminent domain, which means you're going to lose your property. We're gonna pay you for it. And sometimes it's not favorable pricing. Sometimes it is. It doesn't mean it's bad, but he's kind of threatening that. I don't know if he has the ability to do that, but he's also saying, hey, listen, we're not just going to have rent controls. A lot of these big cities have rent controls. It's why you have slumlords, though. It's why a lot of these areas have really bad living conditions. And so they bitch about the living conditions. They bitch about having more affordable housing, yet there's no incentive for the investor to come in and be able to make any money on it, to improve properties, improve living conditions, all that stuff, and then compete with each other because, we're in a competitive business with short-term rentals. We don't typically work with long-term rentals, and we're talking a little bit more about that right now. But if, we always tell everybody, you got to give the consumer a reason to pay you more. If not, you got to drop your price. You got to be competitive, right? When somebody else has something similar, the prices come down, and it's better for the consumer. And so overall, when you have not even rent controls and you fix rent prices and you say you can't ever raise rates on a renter, and they're fixed prices, you can't charge more than X amount. There's no incentive for the investor to go in and improve a property. So if the leaky toilets happen, or you need a painted, it's getting really dirty and it needs to be cleaned, or it needs to be painted, or the carpet's bad, what's the incentive for the investor to go do that? Pretty much none, because they can't recoup that money from the investment that they're going to put in by improving the property, improving living conditions. Doesn't necessarily mean rents always go up, because in a competitive environment, typically you will have market rates that are going to be, they're going to be a certain amount. Now, we are also talking about areas that are not that affordable in the first place.
Right.
So all these rules and regulations have not made it more affordable to live in these types of areas.
Right.
Now you're coming in with somebody that has way more rules, way more regulations, likely. At least that's what his campaign promise is we're going to make it a lot harder to do business in New York, and we're going to make it a lot harder for investors to come in here and make any money. And it's all great for the people that apparently at the bottom end of the spectrum who need more affordable housing and everything else. It's not an affordable place to live anyways. So none of that has really worked, in my opinion. I'm really, it'll be interesting to see what he can and can't do with eminent domain and all that stuff. But we don't invest in certain areas for certain reasons, and people think a lot of times. In fact, I've had comments in our reviews, and I appreciate them when somebody says, "Hey, listen, like your information on short-term rentals, Sean, but I can't stand listening to you talk about politics.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not. I can agree with that because I'm not very good at following politics. I don't follow it very much outside of policies, and I do pay attention to policies in certain areas. And there are certain areas that get very, very regulated, and we avoid them like the plague as investors. So I am typically going to lean to more conservative regulations, more open regulations that say, hey, listen, we believe in free markets and everything else. Now, there's a place for regulations as well, right? You shouldn't be able to go build apartment complexes anywhere you want. You shouldn't be able to go put a gas station right next to a school or a liquor store right next to a school. There's certain regulations that probably need to be there, and you have certain planning and zoning, in different areas for reasons so that you can have, a nice cohesive community. And those things need to be thought out, and zoning needs to be in place for a lot of different asset classes. But when you flat out come in and say, hey, listen, we're gonna try to be the government, solve all these problems that we're not really probably good at solving, I have a problem with a lot of that.
Oh.
So,
well, I'm confused. You're talking about how it's not beneficial if it's rent controlled for the investor to come in and fix those things. But what does it do better for the person who actually has to rent it if the toilet is leaky and the shower's moldy? Like it seems like it's a bad on both ends. I'm sitting here trying to figure out.
I think my opinion is it's worse on both ends. It's worse because there's no incentives. When there's no incentives for an investor to come in and do something, why would they do it? Right. Would you go invest in something that you're not going to be able to make money on?
No, but then why would anyone want to live there? So the whole thing just seems backwards. It seems I don't understand.
It brings down those areas, in my opinion. It's why you have slums and projects and things like that. Those are rent controlled districts in the urban centers. And those are, when you go to those areas that are rent controlled, Section 8 housing, government subsidized housing, all that stuff. Yeah. They're some of your worst areas to live in any given area. And I'm not a real huge fan of it. I mean, I think that it means well. I think that on the surface, a lot of these types of things many times truly probably mean well. But when you really look at it, how it shakes out, and there's a lot of case studies on all this stuff. Just go to a lot of these areas and look and see if it worked. And then when you have somebody like a Mondami come in and says, we're going to even double down and make it, even harder. And we're going to, kind of throw our big gavel down and say, you can't do this, you can't do that. And we're going to make you do it a certain way. If we don't like it, we're going to take your property back. The jury's still out on this, but I don't think that's going to end well for New York. I think that there's just going to be, you're taking away all incentives for an investor or somebody to go spend money in that market and make it better.
Okay. Yeah, that's a tough one. All right.